Let's continue the tour. Going up to the top of the board, we notice that there's some pins, and they start with pin number 0 up through pin number 13. Now, they have labeled this helpfully for us. It says digital, and then in parentheses, PWM tilde, parentheses. We're not going to talk about that right now. We're going to get to it later. But for the time being, let us just draw the distinction between digital and analog. So remember before, we said for our present purposes, we're going to think about analog as being like a dimmer and digital like a switch, on or off. So indeed, all of these pins, and there are more of them, that's pins 0 through 13, which means there are 14 of them, not 13 of them. Don't be fooled. These are digital I/O. What do I mean by I/O? Well, first of all, I don't mean 1/0, and that's a hint that I didn't mean the number 0 because I didn't put a slash. I do mean the letter O. What I/O is short for in land and in computer land is input/output. So simply, for our purposes, if you want to think about digital outputs, these will be that are either turned on or off by the Arduino. Could be something like an LED, a little light. It could be a motor, something that the Arduino is going to turn on or off if you did not want that motor to run at different speeds. It could be that the Arduino is going to be sending data out and talking to another chip. And the way it will do that is by sending on and off signals very fast. Similarly, it will be able to read, so those are all outputs I just mentioned. Similarly, though, it can read inputs, things like, is that button pressed or not pressed? Is that switch flipped or not flipped? Is this door open or closed if you have some door sensor attached to the Arduino? Things that have two possible states, generally speaking, be readable in the digital ports. So there's two special pins here that I want to point out because you should be careful about using them. So I think it's important just to point this out. Generally speaking, by the way, we are going to have a choice. When you decide to make a connection to the Arduino, you're going to have a range of possible pins to choose, most of the time, not always. So if you want to light up an LED, you're going to be able to choose, like, do I want to light it up on pin 5 or pin 10 or pin 12 or pin 8 or whatever? You can plug it in anywhere you want. The device is programmable. So you're going to tell it, I'm going to use pin 5 for this, I'm going to use pin 8 for that, and whatever. You're going to tell it, and that's the next step. Show you how to actually do the telling. So having 14 over there means you have 14 possible choices. By the way, they could all be outputs. They could all be lighting LEDs or doing something like that. They could all be inputs, or they can vary. And a single pin can actually change its role during the Arduino's time being on, during the time it runs a program, if you'd like to do that. So the two special pins I mentioned are pins 0 and 1, and I'm going to draw another odd looking double arrow. Pins 0 and 1 are special communication pins. Because they are special communication pins, don't I'm going to fix that. It's going to look more clearly like a don't. Connect to them unless you have a reason. So, why do I say that? If you plug something into pins 0 or 1, or both, it would be kind of like when the Arduino is talking to the computer and they're trying to have a conversation, it would be kind of like there's two people on the phone and you pick up that same line that they're connected to and you just start saying blah, 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 blah. You will interfere with the communication between the Arduino and the computer. You will make it so they cannot talk to each other because that communication occurs through electrical connections that are also made here on pins 0 and 1. So plugging stuff in interferes with the communication. Broadly speaking, you should avoid plugging stuff in. By the way, let's look more carefully at the annotation they've given us. On pin 1, it's got a little TX and an arrow pointing to the right. On pin 0, it's got an RX and an arrow pointing to the left. What that is indicating to us is that pin 1 is the transmission pin. TX equals transmission. And pin RX, pin 0 is receive. There you go. Transmit and receive. Let's say transmit, not transmission. You get the point, which is that those are their specific directions. So when the Arduino is talking to the computer, when the computer is transmitting data to the Arduino, it's going to be flowing into the Arduino, it's going to be received. So you would be doing that on pin 0. When the Arduino is talking back to the computer, it's going to be transmitting. That's going to be coming out of pin 1. It's going to be data going the other way. That brings us to two previously unlabeled LEDs. If we come over here and look at those TX and RX LEDs, so actually this little light, that TX LED, is transmitting. Whenever the Arduino is transmitting data, that little light is going to be blinking. Where the Arduino is receiving data, this little light's going to be blinking. And you can actually look down at the Arduino and see those little lights blink, blink, blinking. This is another useful early debugging thing to know. So similarly, the power light will tell you if the Arduino is not getting power. Just similarly to that, the TX and the RX lights will help you decide if the Arduino is actually talking to the computer or not. If neither of those lights is lighting up at all when you're trying to talk to the Arduino through the computer, then there is a problem with the communication, and it is not occurring. Useful to know. In the next video, which is an optional one, I'm going to talk about some lesser known features of the board or things that are less important for beginners. But if you're curious about some additional features of the hardware, like this thing and this thing and this thing, and some of the pins I didn't mention, you should watch that video. But it's strictly optional, just if you're interested. After that video, we're going to learn to program an actual program to tell the Arduino to do something.